Skinny Hardaway Southern T. Back with another EP. Y'all do your boy a favor. Y'all jab that like button for your boy when you roll on in. Greatly appreciate everybody sliding through. Welcome to Southern T over here, where we break the news first, because we really be putting in that work. Greatly appreciate you. Greatly appreciate you. Well, we coming off Frank Martin versus Michelle Rivera. Got the boxing world on 10. Frank Martin putting in some real work, over the weekend against Frank Rivera. Very, very impressive win. I said Frank Rivera. Very, very impressive win by Frank Martin over Michelle Rivera. You know what I mean? That he called out Gervonta Tank Davis after the fight. You know what I mean? He called out Gervonta Tank Davis. I think people are a little quiet on that, right? Everybody out here running go fight this guy campaign. Go fight this guy campaign when it come to Frank Martin. You know what I mean? But he did call out Gervonta Tank Davis. But Gervonta Tank Davis has a couple fights. Go on, baby. Gervonta Tank Davis has a couple fights lined up already. So in the meantime, in between time, everyone is contemplating on who exactly is Frank, going to be fighting. You know what I mean? In his next fight, right? So before this fight with Michelle Rivera, Frank Martin and Chris Colbert had a bit of a Frank Martin and Chris Colbert had a bit of a spat. Actually, Frank Martin and Errol Spence had a bit, of a spat going back and forth. Frank Martin, since his loss to Hector Garcia, which Tank Davis is about to fight, right? Chris Colbert, since his loss to Hector Garcia, he's been doing, a lot of calling out, a lot of talking. He called out Albert Bell. Some of y'all may know who Albert Bell is. He called out Albert Bell. He called out Errol Spence. Frank Martin. He called out Garrett Russell. You know what I mean? He's been doing a lot of call outs since his last, fight, his last loss or whatsoever, right? Nothing's really come from it. But he called out Frank Martin, right? So him and Errol Spence were on tour. They were going back and forth. Frank Martin had a fight, right? And then Errol Spence said something, and then Chris Colbert volunteered. Then Chris Colbert volunteered, his thoughts on Frank Martin. And Earl said, that you could fight. What's good, Lulu? Appreciate you sliding through this, young baby. Glad you can make it. And then Chris Colbert gave his thoughts on Frank Martin, right? And Earl Spence said, "Shit, that you could, that we could make that happen. If you really want to, we could make that happen, right?" And then Chris Colbert said, "Cool, he'll blast him." Right. And then we had Frank Martin versus Chris Colbert, and that became, a big thing. They got us excited for Frank Martin versus Chris Colbert. But of course, we know that fight didn't happen. Chris Colbert ended up pulling out of the fight for mental reasons, right? Frank Martin ended up signing the fight Michelle Rivera, shockingly to us, which nobody was mad about, right? We happy about that Frank Martin Rivera fight. So we ain't really harp on it too much. Speaking of Frank Martin and Rivera, Frank Martin was victorious over Rivera. Right? So Chris Colbert decided to take to the internet again. Right? What's good, MP? What the fuck, Miss Joette? Thrill here. What's good with y'all good folks? Appreciate y'all sliding through. If y'all could, smash that like button for your boy when you roll on in. So Chris Colbert, he after Frank Martin's fight was good, Cassandra. Appreciate you sliding through this thing, Cassandra. Glad you can make it. So after Frank Martin's fight with Rivera, Chris Colbert took back to the internet, right? He went back to the internet, and Chris Colbert said that he wanted to, he wanted to fight Frank Martin. What he said was he went to one of Frank Martin's tweets about his fight, and he said, "Frank Martin, let's dance." So apparently, Chris Colbert is back on board with fighting Frank Martin. Apparently, he's past his mental health issue. And I'm not even going to say that Chris Colbert made up a mental health issue, because Chris Colbert, is looking pretty out of shape. You know what I mean? Right now, he's looking pretty out of shape, right? So I'm not gonna say that his mental issue was fake, but he's past it now, and he says he wants to fight. We've heard this before, right? About him fighting Frank Martin. So I do want to believe it. I personally said after Frank Martin's fight that this will be the best fight for him. You know what I mean? For Frank Martin. Uh, you know what I mean? I think this will be the best fight for him. So this is right up the alley of what I was thinking when I made my post-fight reaction. You know what I mean? So I'm all for, this fight. Hopefully it falls through. Frank Martin and Chris Colbert, like I stated earlier, right? They were in talks at first before, but Chris Colbert ended up pulling out. So hopefully, what's good, right? So hopefully this time, everything stays course and we get this fight. You know what I mean? Because I think this is one of the better fights that we could get. You know what I mean? For Frank Martin. I think this would be a great fight for Frank Martin coming out for Rivera win. You step in there with a guy like, what's good, BBG? You step in there with a guy like Chris Colbert. You know what I mean? A big name. And, that'll put you, that'll keep you on top of the game. Right now, Frank Martin's on top of the world, beating Michelle Rivera. You come and you beat, possibly stop Chris Colbert, you know what I mean? That sends you to another level. If you're Chris Colbert, what's the best way, to get your rank back, to get your hype back? You know what I mean? What's the best way to get you back to where you was at first, on top of the world? Beating Frank Martin. So let's hope. I hope this thing comes through. I hope Chris Colbert and Frank Martin actually work this out this time, and we could be looking forward to this fight in 2023. But I ain't gonna keep y'all here too long. Make sure y'all catch me on the backside as well. I'm coming back with another EP in about 20. So make sure y'all come on back through this Thanksgiving Hardaway Southern T. This ain't the past, this ain't the future, but this the present. That's how we rocking. And I'm out. Love.